We'd like to thank Mainspring Companies for sponsoring Season 1 of The Next Entrepreneur. Mainspring celebrates the entrepreneurial journey, and we are very grateful for their support.
I remember that training, it started in Atlanta, and that was the first part. It was a two-part training. So Atlanta, that was, kind of got my feet wet, understanding the pace of management consulting. And then the second training was back at the home base in Chicago. And that one, it was more niche into the actual space I'd be working in instead of this big training like Atlanta. And we went out the first night, and I was the youngest one there by years, right? And everyone's buying me drinks, like, enjoy it, man. It's a great thing. You're going to love it. You're part of the big four. You're going to understand what that means, that badge of honor, whoop, whoop, all of that jazz. And I mean, absolutely hammered. I don't remember how we got back. The very next day when the training actually started, they volunteered me for everything. Like, we had to break out in groups, and regardless, they shifted the groups, right? Regardless of what group I was in, they were like, you're going to be in charge. And so I realized at that moment, like, it didn't matter what you did the night before. When the lights are on, you got to show up.
Hello, I'm Andrew McClendon, your host of the Next Entrepreneur podcast. And I must tell you, folks, I'm having the most fun doing this project. Thank you for tuning in, watching, and viewing us. We appreciate your support. I am here today with our producer, Daniel Sagona, and our guest today is tech entrepreneur, David Facey. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, David is the founder and president of SellSwipe, and you have a couple of distinctions. You are our first tech entrepreneur on the show, and you are our youngest guest on the show,
okay,
but only by a few months. So
that's typically how it goes.
So, David, tell us, what is SellSwipe?
SellSwipe has changed over its life, but at its core, it's a social network and discovery platform that helps locally owned and operated retailers connect with local shoppers. So the idea is that we want to help create better relationships between the citizens in our community that power these local businesses and the shoppers that actually live in it. So on our platform, you can search for products near you, and you can purchase them, you can comment on, and you can share them. So we give that social layer to actual marketplace, and we help the people meet in the middle.
So it helps you buy local, but it also helps share. You can share what type of buying activity you're doing, or
so essentially, let's say that you see a really cool product that you like, right? Maybe you don't want to buy it then, though. You can save it to a wish list, or you can share it or recommend it to all your followers on SellSwipe. So what we saw, though, is that, like, in influencer marketing, there are people that, they can sway consumers' opinions, or they can funnel traffic to a specific business or website. So our idea was that people that have a unique sense of taste, though, or have an eye for the aesthetics, they find products that they like on SellSwipe, they could share it. And people who are looking for hot new items in their community, or from merchants that are creating unique items, hey, I could follow this shopper in my community, and he's going to recommend, the nice products that I should buy. Or, or this woman, she might understand candles, and she follows all of the candle merchants in Baton Rouge. So whenever they're posting new products, she's seen it immediately. And I'm now discovering about those candles from her sharing them to me, because I follow her on SellSwipe.
Oh, wow. So you can follow fellow
shoppers and businesses. Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's really cool. I didn't initially think about the influencer potential there.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, as you also hold the title as Director of Product Development. So, tell me a little bit about what that means.
So, Director of Product Development, for us, it means that I own the product. So when it comes to making decisions on how we're going to build it or what features we're going to include, I'm the one where it's like, hey, this is going to be part of this rollout. That's not going to make this development phase. I work with designers, engineers, though, to build the product, make sure we're building it in a way that's scalable, that's fulfilling the functions that our users require. I lead the interactions between our staff and businesses, understanding what requirements they have for the platform. Because we took this approach that we wanted this to be for the people, but built by the people, right? And these small businesses, there's been so many different companies that work with them to try to give them a service, right? But they don't ever have that two-way dialogue. Like this small merchant, they're going to tell us what they need. And our goal is to take that feedback, though, take it with all the other data, metrics, user studies we have, and build an actual feature that drives the value that they wanted. So I kind of coordinate all that with the different moving parts.
Man, that is so cool. It's immediately deeper than what I had envisioned. So I wanted to ask you, when you look at the skill set that you utilize day to day in doing your job as director of product development or as president, can you look back and can you look at that skill set that it takes to do that job, and then look back at your childhood and go, oh, I see why I'm doing what I do now, because that's exactly how I was wired as a little kid? Or is there none of that, and this is kind of all new stuff for you?
Some people say that the best entrepreneurs are people that solve problems. And so as a kid, I always would ask why. My parents would tell me to do something, and I'd be like, why? Not an act of defiance, but I just wanted to know why. So
Right.
I had this innate desire to always understand the world around me and what was driving it, though. So I would say I was more empathetic than some of my peers, right? But when it comes to what I'm doing now, like the entire way we got started with the question, why is this way? Why can't it be this way? And so I think that inquisitive nature, always, challenging the status quo or trying to understand why I'm doing something, or listening to people, actively listening to them, I think that's gotten me to the point that I'm at now. So it makes some sense.
Yeah, that innate curiosity, right? So I always know I've got an entrepreneur on my hands when they start telling the stories. Well, I got my first whatever, and I immediately took it apart.
Yeah.
They wanted to see how it worked. So I'm always intrigued with that. But you were born in Chicago,
Yep.
right? And then you moved to Baton Rouge when you were,
When I was 9, so in 1999.
and then I saw where you attended Baton Rouge Magnet High.
Yeah, I started off at McKinley High, though. So shout out to McKinley, but I graduated from Baton Rouge High in 2008.
I see. And then you were an LSU grad.
Started off as poli-sci and graduated in finance in 13.
I see. And so you had some experience. You had a finance degree, as you said, but you had some experience in jobs through high school and college in the finance industry. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we had a close family friend who worked as a supervisor over a bunch of financial advisors. And so my first job, I was working for her, helping prepare for her financial audits. So going through clients' files or her reps' clients' files, making sure everything was there from an auditing perspective. And also, interfacing with clients, just telling them things that, needed to be communicated. So
Now, okay, wait a second.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you were doing this?
Man, I started at 16 and did this for 7 years. So yeah, I was 16 when I started.
Yeah, that sounds like heavy lifting intellectually for a 16-year-old.
I felt at home.
Yeah.
Procedural tasks, they're simple and I like them.
Yeah, well, she kept you employed for a reason, right? So, so you did that for a while. I mean, you were on this solid finance path, right? Finance degree. You worked for 7 years with this finance-related company. What was your vision coming out of school, coming out of college?
My vision was that I was going to be this stockbroker, working on Wall Street with a huge book of business, and I would eventually be a hedge fund manager. Very cliche finance, right? That was the plan.
Were there any movies that kind of drew that vision for you?
Oh my gosh. So my uncle, he's been in finance land, one of the first algorithmic traders. And he always told me, you got to watch a Boiler Room. You got to watch a Boiler Room. Like from when I was a kid. I was like, nah, I'm not going to watch Boiler Room until I actually graduate from college and I'm on the precipice of success, right? So I remember the night I graduated, I was like, it's time to watch Boiler Room, something I put off for years. And I remember watching that movie like, oh my gosh, Ben Affleck, I got to do this. And so, that was the vision that I had for my career. But, my innate nature, right? Like understanding the numbers, I just gravitated more to the actual trading side of it, though. And, that comes with a price. And I got burnt out very quickly, and that's when that path started to alter.
But prior to that path being altered, you had achieved your Series 7 financial license, right?
Yeah, I got all the license. Very cliche. I had the 7-3 futures, commodities, whatever you wanted to buy, I could do it, right? And I got those licenses, and then I moved back to Chicago after graduating. Full intention that I would work as a stockbroker. Start that path, right? Eventually become a portfolio manager. But I got connected with a family friend, and I started working as a trader. And that's when I realized I prefer trading over actually being the broker. And I didn't want to really go through the process of being a broker, right? I wanted to trade. So I did that.
And you're trading stocks?
I was trading options on stocks and future contracts, or options on futures for commodities.
For commodities, okay. And so that must have been pretty fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
No, I mean, to me, that sounds...
Yeah, you start understanding the psychology of the markets, though, or understanding like why these derivative financial instruments were created in the first place, what their actual function was for, that it was a way to hedge risk. But then it was like, well, if we can hedge risk, we can speculate on risk as well. And once you start speculating, completely blows up and becomes, its own industry. So it's that question of why. Why does this move this way?
So, you've got a few stories from that time frame that I've read a bit about, but I'm not sure. Had you? Where does you're in Chicago? Where does the Price Waterhouse experience was that?
Where did that come from? So that's when I think that I started to get out of that finance trader land that got burnt out from trading because you're watching the markets, 24/7, right? And you think you're young and you could trade that sleep, but it wasn't sustainable. So I moved into management consulting, PwC, in 2014, and I was working in their financial division as a consultant. And so I remember that training. It started in Atlanta, and that was the first part. It was a 2-part training. So Atlanta, that was kind of got my feet wet, understanding the pace of management consulting. And then the second training was back at the home base in Chicago. And that one, it was more niche into the actual space I'd be working in instead of this big training like Atlanta. And we went out the first night, and I was the youngest one there by years, right? And everyone's buying me drinks, like, enjoy it, man. It's a great thing. You're going to love it. You're part of the big 4. You're going to understand what that means, that badge of honor, whoop, whoop, all of that jazz. And I mean, absolutely hammered. I don't remember how we got back. And the very next day when the training actually started, they volunteered me for everything. Like, we had to break out in groups, and regardless, they shifted the groups, right? Regardless of what group I was in, they were like, you're going to be in charge. And so I realized at that moment, like, it didn't matter what you did the night before. When the lights are on, you got to show up.
So those guys knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah, they had planned it out in advance, for sure.
So young guy comes in, college boy probably, right? Yeah. And so they wear you out.
Yeah, I didn't have any facial hair back then, so they probably thought I was like 18 or something. But
that's great. So how long were you with PwC? Now you're in the management consulting business, and how did you find that compared to the trading?
Oh, you're herding cats for a living. That's what you do as a management consultant. It's a lot of Communication. That communication is key. You're working with different stakeholders. You're trying to get people to a shared vision, a shared understanding, and that comes with different personalities, different stakes, right? You're moving all around the country, so different cultural norms that you have to assimilate to. Like I remember a project in Minneapolis. They were gone at 5 o'clock on the dot, lights shut off and everything. When I was working in New York, you don't leave the office till it's 7 o'clock at night, right? So having to navigate those different things and create that value for the clients you're working with, it was different. It was different.
So you did that for a while, but you're not getting too far from the start of SellSwipe. So walk us through what that looked like. At what point do you start thinking, hey, I'm going to do something else? You founded SellSwipe. Walk us through that. How did that work?
So that story, it's kind of a long one. But while you're working there, you're solving people's problems, right? That's what you're doing as a consultant. You're solving problems. And, it's the problems that you're solving. You don't really get to pick which problems you solved, right? That was the firm. And I was thankful for the opportunity, right? But, the older I got, the more I was placed in areas outside my norm. Like in New York, though, the more my mind just kind of started gravitating to, hey, I want to solve problems that I've identified. But I didn't have the idea for SellSwipe at that point. But I remember, can't believe it's been 5 years. But I had started driving for Uber on the weekends. So I was living in Chicago on the weekends and working in New York during the week. So I would fly back Thursday nights or Friday nights. Well, mostly Friday nights. But there was one weekend in particular where I flew back on a Thursday instead, which I never do because I think I took the Friday off. So that Friday, normally when I'd be in New York or headed to JFK or LaGuardia, I was actually in Chicago. So I visited the hedge fund that I was working at before PwC. And the manager, he looks at me, he's like, hey, we just had a cancellation for our event in the Hamptons. Do you want to go? And I'm like, the Hamptons? Like the Hamptons? It's like, yes, the Hamptons. And so I'm like, this sounds really sketch. I can't commit. And he's like, what you mean you can't commit? You just been asked to the Hamptons. I'm like, I'll have to consult because I think it was Lollapalooza or some big festival that weekend. So I did the math. I was going to make in Chicago. So I was going to make a bunch of money driving as an Uber driver. So I was like, I don't want to pass up this money for this weird sketch thing. He didn't want to give me the address, right? It was more hazing, right? He was like, look, just show up in New York and you'll get an address once you get off the plane. I'm like, this is weird. But so I called a friend from college and I'm like, hey, Mike, I've been offered a chance to go to the Hamptons and go to this fundraiser event, though, with the widow of the first African Black billionaire or something like that. But it's like Lollapalooza weekend, man. I'm going to make like $1,000 in a weekend. What do I do? He's like, boy, if you don't get your butt on that plane to the Hamptons, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go. So I end up, taking the flight early in the morning, Saturday to the Hamptons. And I got off and sure enough, they text me an address, XYZ, Lily Pond Lane. And I'm like, okay, so apparently taxis don't go to the Hamptons, right? From Manhattan, you got to catch like the Hampton Jitney, which is like this charter bus specifically to take people out to the Hamptons. So I was this close to missing that bus. And if I missed that bus, we're not here right now, right? But I get there and I meet the precious woman that was actually throwing the event. And she had said some proverb from the Bible to start off, the event, the actual dinner part of it. Because everybody was, schlumming around, though, saying, I work for this company. And I'm like, I'm a liquidity risk analyst for PwC. I didn't have anything flashy, right? But I tell her, she reads off that verse. And my dad, when I graduated from Baton Rouge High, he gave me that verse on a card that I kept in my wallet. I had the same wallet. It's my first wallet. I don't know, like 15 years, right? So while she's walking down the hill, I pull out that card. I'm like, hey, Mrs. Lewis, my dad actually gave me that card when I graduated. And she looked at me like, who are you? What's your name? Why are you here? Come talk to me. And I'm like, okay. And she immediately asked me, what do you want to do, David? And I'm like, I want to be a hedge fund manager. She's like, we just met and you're lying to me. That's not what you want to do. And I look at her like, how are you going to tell me what I want to do, right? So she's like, you know what, honey? You can sit with me for the rest of the event. So I'm literally sitting right next to the lady that's throwing this event, surrounded by titans of industry, right? And next thing you know, I see everybody looking. Who's that kid with Loida? Who's that kid? And I'm like, I'm nobody, right? But while I was there, an investment banker walked up to me and he was like, he introduced himself, asked how I knew people, et cetera, et cetera. And it would turn out that that investment banker that I met who came up to me at that event in the Hamptons would be the investment banker that actually helped us close our first round of funding for SellSwipe.
Wow.
So yeah, without that event, SellSwipe doesn't really happen. But the actual story for SellSwipe is a separate event that happened literally a day after that event with her. Because when she told me that I didn't know what I really wanted to do, it made me realize she's probably right.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it all blended together.
So why don't we take a quick break right here, and let's pick up with that story of how you transitioned into thinking about your next gig. So we will be right back. MBD Maintenance is a proud sponsor for the Next Entrepreneur podcast, and we greatly appreciate their support. MBD Maintenance is a commercial building and maintenance contractor. They will build your commercial building, maintain it. They do additions, remodeling, tenant improvements. If you need MBD maintenance for your commercial building needs, you can find them online at mbdmaintenance.com. Okay, we are back with David Facey, tech entrepreneur with SellSwipe. And so you've just met your investment banker that will resurface in your life. And you're questioning, okay, well, what is it? What is mine to do if it's not to be a hedge fund manager?
What is it that I want to do? You're absolutely right. So that was on a Saturday, and he wanted to follow up with me on a Monday night. Not Monday night, but we had lunch on Monday. And he's like, David, tell me what you want from life. Like, just tell me what you want. Like, what does David's life look like 20 years from now? What do you have? And so I'm like, man, I got a private jet. I've got a mansion. I put my kids through college. So he tabulates all of that up, though. And this is a former investment banker from Lehman Brothers, right? So he knows his stuff. He's like, you're going to need $130 million for that. How are you going to get that $130 million? I'm like, I don't know. So he had a bottle of Pellegrino on the table, right? He's like, sell me this bottle of Pellegrino. And I immediately froze up. He's like, until you can sell me that bottle of Pellegrino, you're not going to get that $130 million. And I was like, what does that really mean? So that night, that very same night, I had a date. And I wanted to buy her flowers, right? It was a girl that I already knew in New York. And I pulled out my phone and I searched for the nearest flower shop. And Google said it was like 12 blocks up Lexington, right? And it closed in 5 minutes. And that's kind of odd in Manhattan, especially Midtown East, where there should be a flower shop on every corner. So I'm like, whatever, I'm going to run, get these flowers, and it's going to be a great night. So I walk out of the office, and right across the street, there's a flower shop. And at that point, I'm starting to question things because as a millennial, Google is God, right? So why did Google drop the ball? Yes, Google, you dropped the ball. But I go and I end up getting those flowers, and I told the business owner I was literally about to run, to get these flowers because it said the flower shop's up here. And he's like, we've been fiddling with our listing, and for some reason we're not showing up. I ended up getting the flowers for free, right, when I told him that experience. So that entire night with the young lady, I was just distracted. I was like, why wasn't that business on Google, right? Like, isn't that the number one place we go to start looking for businesses around us when we want to shop? And I remember the very first stat that got surfaced to me was that, this is in 2015, mind you. Sure. Google says that only 37% of local businesses claimed an online listing. And out of that information, only 60% of it's correct. So if you crunch those numbers, that means out of every 100 local businesses, only 22 of them have accurate information on the internet to be found. And at that point, I was like, problem, let's figure out a solution. And so that started the rabbit hole that's SellSwipe.
Wow, that's fascinating. So I'm curious, if you look at these, the host of the big gathering in the Hamptons, and then the investment banker, the investment bankers, they have people knocking on their door every day with developed ideas and concepts. And yet those two seemed like they were, giving you this special attention. And, that seems pretty special.
It's lucky, man. Right place, right time.
Man, that's something cool going on there for sure. Okay, so you now have an idea. So walk us through from the timeline from like an idea to where you step out of an income working for someone and start SellSwipe?
So, the idea, right? So immediately I come up with this idea. So I start calling my closest friends, right? Like as a sanity check, like, yo, I've thought about Tinder, but for local products, right? I think I gravitated to Tinder because she dumped me after that date because I wasn't paying attention. Whatever.
The flowers didn't do the trick.
Yeah, the flowers did not cut it. I don't think I've ever bought flowers since. But, you know, I was on Tinder and, you know, I'm thinking like, man, this would be dope. It was local products, yada, yada, yada. And so I called my friend and I'm like, man, I've got this idea. And he was like, that's actually really, really smart. I don't know if the Tinder thing brought him in though, or the actual concept, but he said it was smart. So I was like, let me go find other friends, right, to see if I'm crazy. So I'm calling, you know, my most trusted friends that know me, my personality, and they're like, this is actually something. So at that point, you know, we dive into the research even harder, right? Like understanding the problems of this space, right? Other people that have tried to solve it. How have they solved it? Did they really solve it? You know, what opportunities exist there? And so it started off with a lot of research. So before there was ever a SellSwipe name, we were doing the groundwork, you know, talking to merchants all over the country, trying to understand their space. What is it that, you know, they liked about certain competitors? What did they not like about others? And, you know, once we got all that information, we realized there was an opportunity. And that's when, you know, we actually like, we got to create a company. Now we got to formalize, we got to crystallize this. And then that started off an entire exercise of trying to figure out the name of SellSwipe, which all the marketers that we work with hate. They hate the name SellSwipe, but I'm not changing it. So,
yeah.
But that's how it started.
So, you're working your day job and you're all this stuff is going on.
Yep. So I'm working the day job. We're doing the research, you know, on my off days. And I was able to travel the country because I was working as a management consultant. So every city I'm in on the weekends or, you know, off hours, I'm interviewing merchants, you know, just learning about the space. And when I made the plunge, so I made the plunge because I thought we actually had investment dollars like locked in. I learned a valuable lesson, right? That it's not real. It's not when the people write the check, but when the money is actually cleared in your bank. That's when you actually have it. But I was sitting on a plane, and typically, like at this point, you know, I was diamond medallion a bunch of times over, right? I could pick any seat on the plane with Delta, you know. I was that guy, right? But for some reason, I didn't have my 1A seat on this, you know, this flight. And I was like, who in the heck pushed me out of my 1A? Like, this better be like a king or a prince or something, right? It was a little bit better. It was Seal, right? The singer. Really? So I'm like, okay, I guess I could give up my seat for Seal, right? It makes sense. So they moved me over to like 1D, right? And I'm just looking this whole time like, I kind of wanted my seat, right? But it turns out the lady that I was sitting right next to was a contributor to the New York Times. So I told her about SellSwipe. She fell in love with it. She's like, there's a person you need to meet. So I see this goofy looking guy behind me, you know, Caucasian gentleman with this hat, you know, these glasses, a gold chain and everything. It's like, got to meet him. I'm like, if you say so. Turns out he was the first investor in Etsy, right? Wow. And I'm like, oh, snap. So he runs a bunch of restaurants between New York, Abu Dhabi, London, Tokyo, and everything. And I ended up meeting with him. And he was like, look, I love the idea of SellSwipe, but you know, the idea doesn't matter. I like you. I feel like if I give you $10,000, you're going to be able to turn that into something, right? And I was like, okay, cool deal. So I remember driving back from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, like, we got our first money, guys. This is the real deal. We got to talk to his lawyers. This is it. So I quit my job. And turns out we got ghosted. They never responded. That 10,000, we never got it. Oh, we did get it like 4 years later, but that's another story, right? But yeah, but once you had made that plunge, right? Once, you know, that relationship with PwC ended, I was all in at that point. It was, we got to make this happen. It doesn't matter how, we got to make it happen.
But you have no capital to work with.
You have no capital to work with, right? And that's an interesting position because a lot of entrepreneurs, they typically have a product, right? At that point, they got a product, they got some traction. Investors are willing to give money, right, to accelerate that traction, right? We didn't have any of that. We just had an idea in our head.
Yeah, but David, the thing is like, okay, let's say there's certain entrepreneurs that can go out and do something quickly if it's small. Let's say they build fences or whatever. They could go and do. They could start small, and maybe they wanted to create a big company, but at least they could start small. But when you're in the tech space, it seems to me as if your product's either complete or it's not, and you can't go to market until it is. And so how long does it take from the moment you, start or quit your job and start this new gig to where you can actually get a product out there?
So in tech, right, you got this concept of a minimal viable product, right? It is the lowest version of the product that could actually get us back validated learning, right, which will allow us to iterate and improve the product. And then you have a minimal marketable product, which is what is the minimum amount of value our product or features it needs to have in order for us to sell it, right? So the idea in tech, and you've seen it evolve over the last 10 years, is that build small, get it to customers, get that feedback to customers, right, and build on it, right? Somebody said that if you aren't embarrassed by your MVP, you ship too late. So the idea now is you got to get to market, even if it's small. So we didn't do that at all. We did it wrong, right? And I don't want to say it's wrong because it got me here, but we didn't do it that way, which is what everybody was telling us. So for us, we took this thing, we fully spec'd out all these features that we talked with merchants. We had actually outsourced our development. So we're working with, offshore engineers. I'm staying up all night on calls, leading them like, hey, we don't need that anymore. We need this, because we're working with the retailers at the same time. But
now at this point, you're financing it with your own savings?
When we first started, the contract, we only had 20% of the total contract between our money saved up. So we started them off, but we didn't have the money to finish the contract, right? So I remember, I started designing screens and everything. And, that's when the investment banker, we told him like, yo, we actually need help now. We got to get this money. Help us. And so
you went back to that guy?
Yeah, I went back and I was like, hey, Ken, it's your time to shine, man.
I'm ready to sell that Pellegrino to you.
Oh, yeah, I was ready, boy. The whole crate. So, so I show him the screens we had developed, the little mock, and we ended up raising, I don't know, maybe like 150,000, right? With no product, just, some screens and app shell, right? But we took that money and it turns out we spent a lot of it on, attorneys more so actually building out the product. But we were working with those offshore developers, to get the idea out. And it took us a really long time to actually get to market. And I think that was kind of because we were growing during this process.
So you're getting trademarks and things like that. Is that what the attorneys?
So the trademarks, actually corporate governance, though, making sure that your articles of incorporation are right, that you're not going to get screwed out of your shares by, a T not being crossed or an I dotted, making sure your cap table, your, the equity, how it's split, how it's, owned or who's on the board. Preparing all that's really expensive, right? And then when you're creating privacy policies, like data's been a thing that's been in the forefront, right? Legislation lately, especially now with this COVID-19 stuff, looking how we're, handling people's data. When you create a privacy policy, that's really intensive, right? And, we had to spend a bunch of money on getting our policies, in place.
Wow.
Yeah.
So your product is under development. So why don't we pause for a little bit there and talk a little bit more about the product itself. So when I think of how you're addressing the local market, I think of, there's this interesting stuff that's going on right now, but with the COVID-19 and buying local, but it made me think back to like movements around the country that have been in place for decades in some instances. And I think of the slogan, "Keep Austin Weird," right? Which was adopted by the Austin Independent Business Alliance to promote small businesses in Austin. So to, encourage the citizens to support those businesses versus a Walmart or a big box coming in and wiping out those small businesses. And that's what created the vibe of Austin, right? So there's power in that. And of course, that's what you're tapping into to help them then market their products where they don't have the marketing budget of a big box chain. So you look here in your market that you're focused on right now is Baton Rouge, right?
It turned out to be Baton Rouge.
Yeah. And and it's interesting in this current situation with the COVID-19, there's a lot of emphasis on supporting local businesses, right? And the theory that, look, the big boys will survive. If we want these smaller companies to be around at the end of this, we have to support them now. So it seems like interesting timing for your product specifically.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's funny, we would talk to people and we realized that these brick and mortar people, there's a reason why a lot of them don't have e-commerce websites, right? There's a lot of stuff involved with that. And there's some great companies out there, trying to streamline that for them. But that's a big change for, a retailer that's been in business for 70 years. It's a family business. They've never been online. Yeah. Now I got to put these products online. So our idea was that we wanted to funnel traffic into these businesses, that we wanted to target that relationship between the consumer and the business. And you do that by actually having a physical interaction. So in this COVID-19, the entire buy local thing, the idea was that if we could, transition to, instead of being a buy online, pick up in store, it's more of a buy online for curbside pickup, then that would be a lot of value to these merchants right now. Right. And so, the Chamber of Commerce here reached out to us like, hey, what's going on with SellSwipe? We really need it right now. And, they reached out and that kind of kicked things off for us again. So I think the timing is right, giving consumers and businesses different options for how they interact with each other. It's going to be important, in the world we live in moving forward.
So, so walk us through the process.
Okay.
So you have to attract vendors who will sell their products on the SellSwipe website.
Yep.
And you also have to attract users or buyers. So how do you physically get a vendor online? Is that a door-to-door canvassing?
Ooh, you sound like some of my investors right now before they were investors. So, it's a chicken and egg problem, right? You're building this two-sided marketplace where you need vendors and you need consumers. But the only way the vendors are going to join is if you have consumers. But the only way the consumers join is if you have vendors, right? Right. So, the way we thought about tackling with that issue was we're going to get the vendors first, right? And we're going to take a relationship-focused approach with these vendors, that we're going to actually develop a rapport with them. So they help co-create the product. We had them involved early because without the buy-in from the vendors, you're not going to have any products for consumers to consume. So by working with the vendors, even now when we develop features, we're talking to vendors, right? Like, hey, should this button be here? Or should you want that functionality, like, et cetera, right? They're involved. So by having them involved, they're willing to work with us even if we don't have the vendors, the consumers. So we get those vendors, by working with them or either consulting them, helping with their digital marketing strategy, taking photos of products that they can use on other sites, or just raising exposure through our social media channels. You get that buy-in. But from a consumer standpoint, that's where it gets tricky. That's where you're starting to use analytics, start marketing to people, on social channels, trying to get the shoppers to know that these businesses exist. And so, there's a lot of art more than science when it comes to getting consumers.
And so, so you're using social media then for SellSwipe to then get out to bring traffic back to your website.
So that was what we were focused on, right? But then we realized something, that every brick and mortar has, its own base of foot traffic that's coming in there, right? So maybe, over the course of one day, 50 people matriculate in and out of this business. Well, the idea was if SellSwipe is a more efficient way for the business to interface with the consumer and vice versa, we want these businesses to start telling the foot traffic coming in, hey, go follow us on SellSwipe. You'll be able to see new products when we post them. You'll be able to buy your products, online and just pick them up in the store, right? You'll be able to interface with other shoppers, but also you'll see other products from other businesses.
Right.
So at that point, we were getting a lot of traffic organically just by businesses telling shoppers about it. I remember one time, the thing I love about tech is people are going to use your product in ways that you didn't account for or expect. We gave rack cards to a business, and next thing you know, they started putting it in the bags or stapling on the bags of every shopper that came in there. And so we're just like, that's when everything kind of clicked for us that we need to tap into their traffic. So our strategy for getting consumers is, tapping into the business's existing network, be it digital or be it physical. So,
So how are you defining what type products or what type vendors you want to go and approach first? I mean, you want to build a website with content and products that's appealing to as broad a market as possible, right?
Right. So the way we think about that is we have to look at what are consumers doing right now, that when they go to search engines to search for shops near them, what categories are they looking for? And there's a lot of data on this, right? The first thing people are looking for is, clothing and apparel, right? Then health and beauty products, then pet supplies, then, more novelty items. And so, there's, and it's not like an equal distribution that, 40% of consumers, don't quote me on any of these stats, right?
Sure.
But, for example, 40% of consumers, when they're searching for a business near them, they're looking for, apparel and accessories. So what we do, though, is that's when we canvas a city, right? And like, hey, we want to get the apparel people. So when a consumer comes to our site, there's a higher statistical chance, right, that they're going to look for apparel. Well, let's make sure we have that base covered. So we like to start there, then branch out, based on what the data is telling us. But sometimes you have cities where it doesn't matter what the consumers are searching for. Like this city just has a bunch of boutiques. So you got to get the boutiques. And then how you target from there is look at the influencers. There are more mature vendors here, right? That have been doing it for a long time. They have a lot of clout in the business community. If you can get them onto your platform, you're going to get the other ones, right? So,
okay, so I'm going to ask you a question that the investors were certainly prone to ask you, and that is, so how do you make money doing
oh
this?
man, how do we make money? Oh, that's changed over the years. So initially it was subscription fees, right? And you can do that through a freemium model. Like, hey, there's a free version or there's a premium version. I didn't like it. It didn't sit well with me, right? Like I understand the economics of a software as a service company. I get it, but I didn't want to put that pay gate. I just wanted to use the product. Like the data we're collecting is going to be invaluable and it's going to help you get more sales, right? It's going to help your business out. So I didn't want to put a pay gate. So at that point, that's when the version 2 of the product kind of came into mind, where we're facilitating that buy online, pick up in store transaction. And we realized we can make money off of facilitating that transaction. So we make it off the fees. So originally we started at 15%, which was really high, but our competitors, 27%. So like, hey, we're half that. But then, as we worked with more merchants, that number kept going down and down because, you want, to be saturated with products. So now what we're doing, we settled on 8%. But with COVID-19 going on, we've actually discounted it all the way to cost. So it's like 3.5% right now.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thank you for sharing that model with us. And David, we'll take a quick break right here and get in a word from our sponsor. GearTrain is a national testing, inspection, and audit company that works in the e-commerce fulfillment industry. So these guys provide the quarterly and annual inspections, preventive maintenance inspections, and they do testing and audits of conveyor systems and automated equipment in big distribution facilities. They support the entrepreneur's journey, and we're proud to have them as a sponsor. You can find GearTrain online at geartrainperforms.com. And we are back with David Facey, the founder and president of SellSwipe. So the need for capital in a startup like this continues on, right? So you continue to have to go out and solicit investment dollars. Whatever happened to the what is it? The Etsy
the Etsy investor,
investor.
my boy Sean Meenan. So yeah, so we were working on our second round of financing, and we were going through our Rolodexes, and it was like, who can we get money from that hasn't given us money already? And we thought about Sean. So I was like, you know what? It can't hurt to send him an email. You got to be persistent with these things, right? I sent him an email, and like I get a response back immediately, and he's apologizing profusely. He's like, man, I did you dirty. I got to make it right. I've got a check for 10 bands for you. You just got to come to New Orleans and get it. So we're like, holy crap, that actually worked.
That was quick.
Right. Like, oh, snap. So we get to New Orleans. We meet with him. We kind of tell him the roadmap, and he's like, yep, I'm in. But there's a condition, right? So he showed up to the coffee shop like on a moped, right? You know, playing like old Motown music, right? Loud as heck, right? Just really unconventional. So afterwards, he's like, everything's good. He's like, hey, you're gonna have to follow me back to my house, right? So I can get my checkbook, something. So we're following him, right, on this moped in New Orleans, like rush hour traffic. He's running lights, weaving in and out of stuff. And we're like, he's like, oh, my phone died, by the way. So if you lose me, I don't know what to tell you. So you're right, but game of Mario Kart, and eventually, we caught up to him though. We got that 10,000, which kicked off the second wave of SellSwipe.
Oh, that's funny. So at this point in the story, are you still doing third-party engineering and development?
No. When speaking with investors, right, they want you to own your product, right? They want you to own that IP. It doesn't really talk well to your core capabilities if you're not owning your software as a service company. So that's when we were like, we got to bring this in internally. So it turns out with our mobile application, which was the first version of SellSwipe, we ended up having a data breach. And it wasn't personally identifiable information, but it was still a breach though. So we were like, what is it going to take for us to fix this? And we didn't have, we didn't own it, right? We had developers, but we didn't own it. So they would have to change it. And we're like, we don't want to have to go through this process, especially when it's this serious. So that's when we made the decision like, hey, we're going to have to, what took us 2 years to build, we're going to have to build it over the course of 30 days because that's the window you get, or at least back then when you have a data breach to actually alert consumers. I didn't want to alert them and say, hey, we had a data breach and there's nothing else. I want to be, hey, we have a data breach, but we have a completely new platform for you to use, right? So what we did at that point was we started looking at low-code technologies, right? These are platforms that allow you to build websites with limited coding experience, but it's not necessarily geared that, hey, you don't know how to code. It's about speed and reliability, right? Being able to change things quickly. So we opted for speed. So we ended up, going with this low-code platform, working with our developers to build out the custom modules that we needed to do, though, but we bought it in-house at that point.
And so it's low code, but you're still having.
You still have you're. I don't want to get all in the weeds from a technical perspective though, but you're still having to use your libraries or create custom scripts to handle things for you, right? So there's still a heavy hard coding effort for it.
Do you do any of that or no?
Man, I work on like the back end related stuff, like the API integrations though, like. You grab any random app on your phone and there's probably, like 30 different services or APIs that are powering that, right?
Oh, wow.
Don't keep me on the numbers, right?
Yeah.
But that's the general concept. So I live in that space. But in terms of like the front end coding or, working for the custom modules, I've got a team that does that.
So I saw you posted something on your social media. It seems like it was in the last week or two where you said that a big company, $80 billion company had said that they had loved your product and you were just super pumped about that. And not to get into the specifics, but like, how did that feel for you?
How did it feel? It was a feeling of validation. You sit because, when you're getting capital, it's not even about capital. It's about partnerships or finding champions in your corner. Because, being a tech entrepreneur, it's difficult, right? Because everyone has an idea for an app, though, and typically you meet people, you're just a kid with an idea, right? Everyone's got an idea. Okay, you built an app, so what, right? Show me how many users you got. And unless you have those hard metrics, people don't really believe in you, regardless of the utility or how ingenious your product might be. If people aren't using it, does it really matter if a tree falls and no one was there to hear it, right? So when we met with that company, and that's with the new initiative that we're kicking off, that's how that conversation started. But when they were like, we were already looking at your product, we like it, that was like someone who's actually a thought leader in the space, validating the 5 years of blood, sweat, and turmoil that I've endured and lost. So I can't put it in words.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. Well, I could tell from your post that it was a pretty good moment for you. So let's talk a little bit about moving forward and your vision for SellSwipe, and then what you think it's going to take for you to grow into that vision. What are your growth plans, and then how do you think you're going to fund that?
So just future looking. So right now, unprecedented crisis with COVID-19. That's, ridiculous, but
it's crazy.
All of these small merchants, these brick and mortar retailers, it's a new world order. They're going to have to adapt or they're going to die. It's that simple, unfortunately. So for us, facilitating that next wave to getting businesses to digital, right? What does that journey look like? That's what we're focused on. So we've kicked off a new initiative called Keep America Shopping, right? And what we do is we go to cities or neighborhoods and we partner with community organizations, for example, BRAC, and we kick off campaigns around that city. So you have a Keep BR Shopping. And Keep BR Shopping, it's a directory, right, where a business can simply just put their information and say, hey, we're open for business. We're doing curbside orders. We have a website. Maybe we don't have a website, but we're going to have a website. Or, you can see our products on social media, call us, order on the phone, you can come pick it up. But we want it to be a low entry to barrier so that people can actually discover these businesses that are fighting for survival in their community. So we've kicked off a Keep BR Shopping campaign, a partner with BRAC. We're working right now on Keep NOLA Shopping in New Orleans with the New Orleans Economic Business Alliance. Forgive me if I get the name wrong. Yeah. But we're also working to kick off Keep Louisiana Shopping with the state, LED. So, we're also in talks with other cities across the country to kick off campaigns for their cities. And the idea is that we want to increase the visibility of these retailers right now, especially right now. And, we do that through storytelling, telling the stories that, hey, that is not just a business. That is a member of the community that looks like you, that walks and talks like you, that's endured like you have, right? Supporting their business is not just putting money in their pocket, it's putting money back into your community. Because when you spend, $1 at a locally owned and operated, business, 3 times of that dollar stays in your community, right? Then if you go outwards.
Yeah, that's a powerful part of the message for sure, right?
Yeah. So in terms of the growth for SellSwipe, our idea is that we want to focus on this Keep America Shopping campaign right now, increasing the visibility, right? And understanding, I think that's another thing that tech entrepreneurs will understand, though, is that your product is not meant to stay static. It's dynamic. It's got to respond to the market. Things are going to change. People's desires are going to change, right? So for us, we want to make sure that we're at the forefront of the conversation so that we can understand what it is that consumers and retailers need for this new world. And, we'll make the pivot for our company to make sure that we're facilitating that.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because it seems like it is a prime time for your product in the midst of this pandemic, where it seems as if the world's ending for many people may think that for their businesses or whatever, and yet it seems like your product is well timed for today's situation. But I'm curious, in growing that will require investment, right, and capital, and what does that market look like in today's world?
what does the investment market look like right now?
I mean, for an entrepreneur like you, you know, to facilitate your vision, are those dollars harder to come by today? I certainly would think so.
So yeah, you're seeing a lot of investors, risk adverse right now. It's not that they think the economy is going belly up or it's going to be bad, right? But the uncertainty surrounding the economy right now wants them to hold on to their dollars. So it's going to be difficult. It's always difficult, and I'm going to say that again. It's always difficult to raise capital. Don't let anyone lie to you, right?
Yeah.
So right now, in terms of raising capital, we don't really know. To be honest with you, the best strategy for that, though, is that we want to provide value, right, to businesses right now. And figuring out how to create that value, then capture that value, right, is something that we're thinking about that, hey, are we going to take, dilutive capital, right? Or are we going to, try to generate some revenue right now with some quick wins? Are we going to try a sponsorship strategy for our Keep America shopping, right? Which could kick everything off so we can expand to these different cities. Those are things we're thinking about internally right now. But in terms of raising capital, it's going to be difficult if that's the route we go.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you could have a great product and you could have someone willing to give you capital, but at the wrong price, and it's too dilutive. And then you're like, well, I can't do this deal. Yeah, the capital's there. Or it's kind of a Shark Tank thing, right?
Yeah, and that's where the finance background has shined brightly for me, is understanding what that means, right? When you take in this capital, what will that look like, 10 years from now? Like, how will that impact your ownership stake in your company? I won't say it happens often, but you have it to where there's a misalignment of stakeholder interest, right? That you might be the founding team, you are the vision behind your product, but you're not economically incentivized like your shareholders to keep the product going. So what happens when you get burnt out and you want to quit? You don't have enough piece of the pie anymore to keep you there. So when I talk to entrepreneurs, a lot of times, you'll hear people like, oh, I'm going to give 50% away to a technical co-founder, right? And I'm like, you need to start thinking in terms of like how much that service actually costs, right? That if it's going to cost $30,000 to get you an MVP, are you saying that your company's worth $60,000 at that point? You're going to give away half of it? Like, reframe the thinking about that, right? Understanding that it's not about you being in control of the ship, though. It's about putting you in a position to where you can make moves and stay lean and stay nimble, right? A lot of people, they don't think about, we're going to have to give away equity to future people that come on, right? So do we have an option pool? You say option pool, people freak out. What's an option pool, right? You got to set away, stock to give to future employees, right? And if you take in capital, that option pool is going to have to stay unfettered, right? You got to leave that there. So it's going to be even extra dilutive. So when you're thinking about what is the very next step that you need to take, right? If I need funding, right? And I always tell people, through my own experiences, try to find the ways that you can keep your business moving without outside capital, right? Outside capital is meant to grow your business, not start your business. In tech entrepreneur, it started ours, kind of, sort of, right? But it's not meant for that. So you need to really think through your goals, right? Think through the very next action you need. If you need to take in capital, take in just enough, right? To get you to that next point, or get you to a point where you can develop traction, attract a higher valuation, right? And take in a larger piece of bread.
Yeah. Very cool. So I wanted to ask you, like, what you do for inspiration, or maybe what inspires you. And then I was going to follow up with, what do you do for relaxation? So to keep you fired up as you get out of bed in the morning to go and make the best of your day at work, what is your inspiration?
My inspiration, excuse me. Passion. Like seeing other people work hard, right, for what they want. It's like, you can't slack off, David. You got to work hard too. So, hearing about other tech entrepreneurs that are continuing in their journey, though, or people in the arts, though, that are working hard, that, that have that different level of intelligence that you can't really teach, right? But they're, using it to the maximum ability, right? Those are things that inspire me. So just stories, right? Stories of other people that are trying to work towards their dream. So I do a lot of reading. In terms of how do I relax, relaxing for me though, it goes back to the reading. You always have to be sharpening your mind, learning your space, right? So if you're not actually working towards, something that's like hard quantum, like you're actually working on your product, it's about, reading other things that might be tangentially related to it, right? So to decompress though, I'll just start reading. Like lately, I'm on the governor's task force for the COVID-19 Resilient Louisiana Commission for the IT, working with the small businesses. And we're, thinking about smart cities, right? So my decompression right now is reading about smart cities all around the world and how they've used data to make a better society or a smarter society. So for me, it's just, reading.
That is so cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, it has been a pleasure to talk to you. It's been exciting to listen to your journey. And so thank you so much for sharing it. And we wish you the best of luck.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. David is truly the next entrepreneur. He's a smart guy, got a great education, went out into the world of big business, chasing that corporate path, worked for hedge fund managers and business consulting firms. He got an idea, turned into a passion, and came back home to build an e-commerce platform for small businesses and local businesses. And I think it's very timely, his idea, and we wish him the best of luck as he builds that out. If you'd like to reach David, you can find him at contact@sellswipe.com. Thank you for listening to the Next Entrepreneur podcast. We'd like to thank our title sponsor, Mainspring Companies. It can be reached online at mainspringcompanies.com. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach us at ask@nxtentrepreneur.com. You can subscribe to the Next Entrepreneur podcast on Apple Music, Spotify, Stitcher, or iHeartRadio. You can help support our podcasts by leaving a review on Apple Music. You can follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please share this episode with your family and friends. The Next Entrepreneur is produced by Propel Productions. They can be reached at propelyourstory.com. Today's episode was produced by Daniel Sagona.